in this current stage that I am with Jamison Link, I'm being the link between companies who are actively looking for professionals to join their team, but really qualifying those skill sets so that when they get a resume from me, they know that this is someone that they want to talk to or have a conversation with because I've qualified the skill set based on my experience in the market. Quite frankly, you can run into people who say, I've reached this pinnacle point in my career. I'm done. I don't want to go back to school. I don't want any more certifications. And when you have candidates like that in the technical space, you probably don't have the best candidate, right? You absolutely have to have a constant learner who is open to trying new things, open to making mistakes. And you as a company have to be willing to kind of grow with that person as well. Okay, if they make a mistake, do I have the right team behind them to help fix what the problem is? And more importantly, can I coach them so that they can continue to make the type of mistakes that's going to help our organization grow? Everyone says AI is going to replace the recruiter. Well, AI is fantastic with maybe having the resume and the resume qualifying maybe 60% or 80%, or you can put parameters as to what you want the AI qualifications to be. But it's those soft skills that AI can't get past, right? So if you have 25,000 resumes for 5 positions, AI is fantastic for scaling down. It's now getting down to, let's get 10 people for each one of those positions. Now we go from those 10 to let's get down to 1 person for those 5 roles each. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and each role is going to have its own little specifications and nuances. And then the team dynamic to also try to fit in. So if you don't understand the team as a recruiter, AI can't understand the team.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to CSA's Collab Space. I am Amy Cisse, and today I am here with Alisha Jamison. Alisha, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Amy. This is exciting, and I'm extremely excited to talk about what you have going on with Collab Space and what Jamison Link Business Solutions does.
Absolutely. So let's start there, right? Let's talk about what you're doing with Jamison Link.
Well, the key to this whole sourcing role and business that I've been in for the last 15 years is connecting people with great opportunities. So Jamison Link is just that. We're executive recruiting firm, recruiting agency that supports clients in the technology and finance space. Overall, looking at how the market is changing for AI recruitment, how we're utilizing those particular services, but more importantly, also looking into various spaces like software asset management and really developing a deep bench of talent that has that particular skill set. As you may know, that is a hot spot for a lot of companies in understanding their software positioning, but identifying talent is actually a real challenge for a lot of companies. So Jamison Link tries to connect opportunities to people all across the technology space, but primarily in the IT asset management community.
That's awesome. And so we've known each other for a very, very long time. And you have been doing an amazing job in the recruitment space for many, many years. So your level of expertise, your team's expertise, I'm sure is going to provide just exceptional services to your clients.
Well, that's the goal, right? It's interesting. I think when I first started off, they told me, you don't go to school to become a recruiter. And that is absolutely a true fact, right? A lot of people come into the business. A lot of companies leave the business. It is a very hard space to be in. Contingency and retained search. I have been in the contingency space for, I spent maybe 10 years before I went internal with a large Big Four public accounting firm, worked in that space and just learned a ton about what companies look for when they're looking for talent, but more importantly, what clients and candidates are looking for when they're looking for opportunities, because you're not just getting them a job, you're really impacting their entire life. Where they go to school or how they support their children, drop-offs and pickups, what the career development could possibly look like long term for them, the stepping stones of that particular position in the overall goal of the candidate. I think that what we've gotten a chance to do is really not only build relationships from back when I started, but continue to build new relationships and understand what people are doing to get where they are now and where they'd like to go. So it's a constant pendulum of opportunity and really building those relationships down the road. So that's what we specialize in is the relationship side of those resumes.
So when you say you don't go to school for recruiting, like what does that mean? Is there something that you have to organically learn about and grow in over time? Like, how does that look for someone who wants to actually venture into that space?
So talent acquisition, recruiting, HR, they all sound like they sit in the same space, but they're very, very different in your day-to-day responsibilities. Your HR generalist and HR professionals, they're really the people who manage your EEO compliance and making sure that the guidelines are set. And sometimes they go through the broadband of basing salaries. And there's a lot of strategic internal supporting of the company that HR does. They're really the advocates for the organization to find talent. Talent, though, and talent acquisition, which I'm deeply steeped in, recruiting, identifying people, finding those people who are looking for the role that HR team has identified as a need for the internal team, is a specialized craft. And the reason I say that is because when you go to undergrad, I went to the illustrious Hampton University in Hampton, Virginia, and there wasn't a recruiting major, right? My major was accounting. And the way I came into the business is because I'm just not the best accountant in the world. It's not my it's not my forte. I passed my college degree. However, it wasn't the space that I felt at home in. Where I felt at home was having conversations about accounting jobs, what people did day in and day out. So it helped me really understand. I understood accounts payable, accounts receivable, your controllers, what your assistant controller would do, and more importantly, the makeup of a person who was trying to progress in their career. So I understood the mechanics of the department, but I didn't like doing the job. So as you can imagine, I went into the agency side. And when you go into the agency side, it is a hodgepodge of people who come in, they try it out, they decide that they either love the pressure that recruitment has or they absolutely hate it. Well, I became a two-time award-winning recruiter for the agency that I was with, and that was by placing people because I listened to what the candidate was asking for. And the number one thing at the time, now mind you, completely different world now because everybody can remote from home, but was commute, right? And they how much time they spent in their car relative to doing the job. And so I lived in Washington, D.C. at the time. And if you're familiar with Washington, D.C., which I believe you are very familiar, you can be in their car for 45 minutes just going down 10 miles of the road. So that was a big thing to a lot of candidates. And listening to some of those pain points of the people then helped me make sure that I listened to the pain points of the company, right? Maybe commute wasn't their issue or the time in that the person clocked in, but really the ability to execute on whatever the job function was, how well they articulated their skill set, and then how well they actually executed those positions, and helping candidates through those interview processes and answering questions. So the preparation of those people. So as you can imagine, having an accounting degree and going through your debits and credits weren't necessarily the useful skill set that I had, but I understood the mechanics. That then led me into the desire to try on technology after the 2008 financial crisis. A lot of those luxury positions in the finance department, like financial analysts, professionals who were, lower level, things that the controller could do, but might not have wanted to, those positions started to get eliminated, quite frankly, because companies were trying to cut their budget, manage the financial crisis, figure out what's next. And I said, okay, well, if they're no one hiring, I need to go into technology. And that led me down to an illustrious career of identifying talent within the software space, the networking space, and really just digging into what that looked like from your Microsoft applications, Oracle, working through ServiceNow, and just really understanding the mechanics of what people do in technology. And so here I am today, once again, making an in-depth effort to really specialize in skill sets, particularly technology, because as you can imagine, we've seen a ton of layoffs happening. Even I was impacted by layoffs with my Big Four public accounting firm on the consulting side. Internally, they just weren't hiring anymore. And unfortunately, if you're not hiring, that means there's no need for a recruiter internally all the time. So here, in this current stage that I am with Jamison Link, I'm being the link between companies who are actively looking for professionals to join their team, but really qualifying those skill sets so that when they get a resume from me, they know that this is someone that they want to talk to or have a conversation with because I've qualified the skill set based on my experience in the market.
So it sounds like you're putting together a jigsaw puzzle.
Every day.
And I'm sure that's such a huge balancing act, just trying to fit in all those dynamics, all those requirements. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I think when you kind of think about like everyone says AI is going to replace the recruiter. Well, AI is fantastic with maybe having the resume and the resume qualifying maybe 60% or 80%, or you can put parameters as to what you want the AI qualifications to be. But it's those soft skills that AI can't get past, right? So if you have 25,000 resumes for 5 positions, AI is fantastic for scaling down. It's now getting down to let's get 10 people for each one of those positions. Now we go from those 10 to let's get down to 1 person for those 5 roles each. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And each role is going to have its own little specifications and nuances. And then the team dynamic to also try to fit in. So if you don't understand the team as a recruiter, AI can't understand the team. And there's really a hard stop when you try to say, let me get that feel. Let me make sure that person's going to be a good fit for our team and what we're trying to build here. And quite frankly, AI is not going to be in that space of the look and feel of the team that you're trying to build for a while. I don't know when it's going to happen, but right now it's still so new. It's just fun to get from that 25,000 resumes down to the 5, right? Let's just get those best qualified. And that's where recruiting firms really come in.
Right. Because you can't tell AI filter through this personality type, because those types of dynamics are something that I'm imagining that you have to learn over time, because you're looking at not just what they're saying, but maybe body language, or you're asking, like you have to then modify your next question based on what they previously said to kind of really dig into what their personality is like. And sometimes I'm sure the interviews and how you're, reviewing people just has to be something that is not necessarily trainable by technology.
And to be candid, tech people sometimes don't interview well. I mean,
very true.
Right. I think that there are, and I'm not a physician, right? And I'm not a scientist, but there are a number of people who have a little bit of trouble with connecting. So imagine connecting through a monitor, or the nervousness that you have when you're sitting in front of someone, or a little fidget that you may display that could be, somebody goes, well, why do they do that? Right? Like there's multi-levels of generations that are interviewing each other, right? Gen Z, baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, we're all in this hodgepodge of career dynamics right now. And being that recruiter that can say, okay, listen, the candidate may have a small little kind of tick that we have to just bring to your attention, just to make sure that you're comfortable with that person, and not to provide any like disability statements or anything like that, but maybe there might be a slight area that you have to be like, okay, you may need to slow down if you are trying to get through this particular technical review. They may need a little extra time if this is something. And that's also going to be something oftentimes that's going to be in the workplace Monday through Friday. So if you're aware of it as a hiring manager, you're in a much better position to make a decision versus disqualifying someone who is completely fantastic at the job for the fact that they might take 5 extra minutes to maybe understand exactly what you're asking, or they may repeat your question to make sure they understand what you're asking. So there's so many different dynamics that you're taking into consideration when identifying talent.
So it sounds like you're not just sending over your clients a resume and saying, here, take this person, they're a good fit. It sounds like you're coaching them up and helping them to understand the person holistically versus here's just the person, see if you like them or not, because they could disqualify them because if they don't have the full picture that you would have.
You are nailing the head, right? There is coaching on both ends. It is not in any way, shape, or form a one-sided, let me submit this resume to Career Builder and yes, no, right? That's often what people pay for when they pay the whatever fee that they're paying for access to a resume company. When you're utilizing an agency like Jamison Link, you're utilizing the expertise that we bring to the table to say, here's the qualifications of that particular candidate. This is what they bring to the table. This is what I was impressed with. This is why I was impressed, and how their prior experience relates to what you're asking me for. And then from the client perspective, we're really asking the questions about, okay, so if you're really trying to hire someone who has 8 years of AI experience, you realize that AI has only really been around for 2 years. So let's maybe dial back our expectations, right? And coaching them on really what's in the market, what possibly could be a successful hire, and really the likely skill sets that can transition into what they're looking for. Because I think that one thing that I stress to clients that I work with is that sometimes in this modern age of adjustment and change, every 3 to 6 months, every year something new is being released, you're going to have to make sure that we have candidates that are adaptable, that can learn, that are ready for additional training, who want additional training, because you, quite frankly, you can run into people who say, I've reached this pinnacle point in my career. I'm done. I don't want to go back to school. I don't want any more certifications. And when you have candidates like that in the technical space, you probably don't have the best candidate, right? You absolutely have to have a constant learner who is open to trying new things, open to making mistakes. And you as a company have to be willing to kind of grow with that person as well. Okay, if they make a mistake, do I have the right team behind them to help fix what the problem is? And more importantly, can I coach them so that they can continue to make the type of mistakes that's going to help our organization grow? You know, fall into the next level, fall into the number one spot with all the mistakes that you make. But more importantly, if you have the type of environment that's coachable, or team that's coachable, and leadership that want to coach people, you're going to have a growing team and a growth mindset all the way.
Right. Because people are going to make mistakes. And, you know, you have to encourage people to just push the button. Just see how it works, right? And just figure it out as you go along, because that's the best way that you're going to learn. And if you don't make mistakes in life, how will you ever learn?
That's it.
And you can't expect perfection, because no one's perfect.
I mean, quite frankly, if you think about Amazon, right? It starts off in someone's garage. Next thing you know, we're in a multi-billion-dollar company. And I can imagine how many mistakes and how many launch products that organization has made that hasn't been successful, how many groups and departments that haven't been successful. However, they continue to invest in their people. They take chances. And if it doesn't work, it's okay that it doesn't work. But when it does, Oh, when it does, it's a beautiful thing. And you get the right minds in the same team, you get the right questions going, you get the naysayer, right? That's always thinking the negative part of it. I think that that's the part of identifying and hiring talent that helps an organization grow. And so Jamison Link really tries to be able to say to a client, all right, here's where the candidate might have transitioned well or didn't, and this is what they've told us that they've learned different or try to approach this project differently. But when you're interviewing, I would suggest to maybe dig into this particular part of the conversation so that you feel comfortable with how they approached it, right? I think it's a marriage, right? You're going to either marry that candidate for a year or to six months to a year to 15 years, right? It's all about, can we get the right person who's willing to try, make mistakes, not be afraid, and as the organization, is the organization also willing to, all right, we might make a mistake with this candidate hire. However, we tried and we gave it our best shot to make sure we position them to be able to grow.
In addition to the client being open to the candidates that they bring on board and being flexible, what are some of the other characteristics of your ideal client?
Oh, ideal client. I think the communication between the agency, Jamison Link, and our clients have been really successful when the client is willing to take an opportunity to really talk through and bring all the team members that are involved with this person's success. It doesn't have to be just one manager saying, I'm hiring my mini me, right? Because you're never going to find someone perfect. And it can't always be the person you want to have a beer with after work. And understanding that the parameters of someone's life is not 9 to 5. It's not just when they come into your organization. It's the holistic part of that person, their family, what they strive to in their career and professional goals, and the role that they're taking on with the organization. And once again, this is professional level positions, people who are getting certifications, going out for additional education. When they come into your office, the type of leaders you have in place. Are you positioning the candidates to work with micromanagers? And if you are we giving the candidates on our end the right questions to ask to find out if they can work well under a micromanager, or if they're looking for someone who is going to give them flexibility to grow, right? And make those mistakes, right? So accountability is one thing from the candidate's perspective, but understanding the type of manager that you're placing over a particular candidate is very important. So when we're interviewing and doing intake interviews with the company, we want to know just as much about the hiring manager as much as possible as we would potentially know about the candidate, right? Do we have someone who deflects? Do we have a manager that gives assignments but hasn't really been well coached on how to develop their own people? There are tons of dynamics in that alone, right? That gives to a candidate's satisfaction for their particular job. I don't want to go somewhere where I have someone asking me every day if I did something. I should be able to turn it in, right? We've gotten to a certain point, right, as a candidate. And if the candidate is giving you bad information, you either give them more support or you pull back, right? And so understanding if the hiring manager has the ability to do ebbs and flows as they're hiring for candidates. So in some cases, HR comes in and they like to be the gatekeeper, but ideally, clients that we work with are really the hiring managers that are being able to make the decision as to who they're going to have on their team. And then we can really talk about who is particularly joining them and why they're potentially a good fit for them. So that direct access often is the best client that I have had the exposure to.
Right. And those are like very valid points, right? Because sometimes it is the management style. And sometimes the lack of trust in a manager could be that your processes need to be reevaluated so that you're not a micromanager. And are you being supported with, up-to-date processes? Maybe it's agile processes, so that you are getting the information and the updates that you need on a regular basis to support that individual so they don't feel smothered.
Very much so. You would be surprised how many people, although they'll say I'm an agile manager, I have a Scrum certification, and you're like, oh, great, fantastic. So you know how to make adjustments as needed, and yet they still operate in our old classic waterfall. All right, we have this date, and if everything is done by this, then we'll start. And you're like, that's not going to be. It's agile. Not going to be a good success, right?
No.
And, so, and quite frankly, what cracks me up is that they might not know that they do that. Right? The subconscious things that happen, the little nuances that leaders may have that candidates, their new employees have to learn so that they can be successful in that environment. And so those are all in play. And when you work with an agency or a recruiting firm, although there may be, of course, a more expensive price point on that particular hire, the likelihood that the hire is going to be successful in the position is much higher simply because of the qualifications and the screening process that we go through to be able to get you that person, to get you the right person oftentimes.
You want value. You might have to pay a little more for it, but you're going to get exactly what you need. I love it.
You're not going to get the Bentley on a Ford budget. It's not going to happen.
Agreed. So we've talked about talent and recruitment. What about the software asset management piece?
Oh my goodness. So software asset management became an interest for me in 2022. I got introduced to a team that I was just going to try out with my prior employer. And that world became fascinating. And I'll tell you a couple of things. One, companies can't really do a really good job with understanding their financial position, really, and budgetary requirements if they don't know what kind of assets they have on their books. And one of the assets that are often overlooked is software and the entitlement positions that companies have and the regulatory compliance. So in addition to having my exposure to recruitment and going in that area for years, IT asset management became an interest because I was like, hey, what happens when your company hasn't paid their actual licensing fees? And if you have an organization that has thousands and hundreds of thousands of employees, and all of a sudden, you're going to be required to pay a licensing fee for each employee that you have on staff, have you really done the proper reviews within your organization to identify what sits on your servers? That's the part of my job as a recruiter, is to learn what people do, and learning about what those software systems do day in and day out helps me have better conversations. So as I came into the IT asset management space, I started understanding that compliance requirements is an area that a lot of companies overlook, and is not an area that they go, oh, I need to find talent for that space. Sometimes they have one IT asset manager or sometimes two, and they
sometimes none.
Or sometimes none. And so I found that was really an area that interested me, and really helping companies understand their compliance and their obligations to some of these systems that they sign up for. So you have your operating system, you have your software system, like you have so many different technologies that you sign up, and you continuously sometimes don't even use things. They're just sitting there dead because whoever signed up for it is no longer at the company. And now you're paid an annual fee for those particular services that you no longer need. So being able to be a recruiter who says, okay, let me not only understand what these folks do day in and day out, but also be able to identify talent to help you either, one, get under better compliance, two, pay attention to some of these big software audit firms, software companies that like to do audits on their customers, and really understand how those inner workings happening. Because if you don't have someone on staff paying attention to it, quite frankly, it's a shocker when you get a bill in the mail for your systems, and you're like, I thought we were completely paid up. I thought we took care of this. I like to help companies avoid those particular shocking price tags.
And some of it is being proactive, because in our case, if Microsoft decommissions a certain service product, app perhaps, then you have to then get ahead of it. So if they're retiring a feature, product, license, whatever the case may be, you want to make sure that you're proactive about what that transition looks like, what that plan looks like, because if you're proactive about it, then you can put a plan in place ahead of time so that you're not at the last minute trying to hurry up and make a rash decision that might not be the best fit for your company. Or like you said, if there's something that has that's end of life and you're now out of compliance because you're on antiquated software, like that's a huge risk as well, because there might not be any more security updates that are being released for that product.
Exactly. Those security updates don't hit it, right? If it's a decommissioned item and we don't support it anymore, then you don't get the security updates. And quite frankly, any customers that could possibly be sitting in that particular space can be impacted. So I think, once again, I am absolutely, I even went out and got the certification, Amy, just so that I can learn more about the KPIs that are related to software asset management and how to better equip talent going forward. Because I honestly believe this is an area of recruitment that is a tad bit overlooked. There are there's two major conferences that happen where there's a community of talent professionals that pretty much do this all the time, but it's very, very tight knit. And just like when I said at the beginning, I didn't come out of undergrad looking to become a recruiter. A lot of people don't come out of undergrad looking to be an IT asset manager. They literally go into the role either from a position of hardware or help desk support that they've done, and they've been the people who are managing the inventory, and now they're managing the hardware side of it, but they haven't gotten exposed to the software side. And so this is still an area that's fast growing, lots of opportunity, lots of great certifications, and an area that I think that as people are trying to find ways to diversify their skill set and identifying opportunities for themselves, this is an area that is going to have a huge demand for people. And that also goes back to that flexibility conversation. A lot of the best IT asset managers that I've met did not start off with a degree in computer science or a degree in engineering. It is amazing for me to see how the skill set is continuously evolving, and the certifications are supporting that. So Into Life is a whole entire business, and being able to getting all those decommissioned products and softwares off of your laptops, computers, and anything that's on your network, but then also knowing what you should buy, what you should invest in, and making sure that you're making good procurement decisions. So that, who wants to just have an open checkbook for IT? No one, right? No one wants just an open checkbook. So this is where Jamison Link just really specializes in trying to be in front of what the trends are. So making sure we're identifying talent, making sure that we're having those very soft conversations that are related to making sure we're identifying the right people for the right team and plugging and playing where we can. So it's really been a journey over the course of my career, and making sure that I am fully aware who I'm referring and what they do and how that comes along.
Yeah, I never thought about it that way, because you don't hear people saying that they finish some certification or program in college and I'm going to be an asset manager. But then you don't hear a lot of companies also having that as a position. I feel like it's always like tacked on to someone's role that's in IT.
Always. Yeah, your system admins, they are often the people who are the first go-to, but if they're trying to do all the system admin, making sure everybody is in the right roles and making sure that they're not letting the wrong people in, avoiding risk and supporting their systems properly, you're also not going to be sitting there all day long going through your software and who has access to this particular software and if it's decommissioned or not and what they need to do. So it is a completely separate job function within most IT departments, just tacked on to somebody else's. So I think there should be two salaries for that person. What do you think?
Exactly. Absolutely. Because the treasure hunt of trying to even understand Microsoft license changes, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of time. And our team, we spend a lot of time just understanding how Microsoft changes their licenses all the time. So yes, it's the commercial space, it's the education space, it's the government space, it's all these different components, and there's so many SKUs for
Yes.
software. So trying to understand which services, which apps are included in that one license.
One
One license.
license. So think about how many you have, right? And not having a specialist or someone dedicated to focusing on just the updates alone. I would say one of my favorites is Oracle. Oracle can be its own beast. I mean, quite frankly, and people are challenged with it all the time. And if you're not prepared as an organization to really look at what that looks like long term, right? What that one license means, what kind of updates, what kind of reporting you have to do, it absolutely becomes a nightmare if you receive an inquiry, a question about your Oracle positions and who's on your system and how many of those have actually been updated. So it is a space that has tons of opportunity for professionals who are developing their career. And then it also is an opportunity for organizations to take a step back and say, okay, do we have a dedicated person to make sure that we're in compliance with all these things and that we're supporting our clients if we're a service provider, if we do third-party vending, whatever we may do we have a dedicated professional to make sure that we're compliant with a lot of these entitlement positions that are required?
You hit a hot topic, compliance. So
Yes.
Compliance is just such a big deal, especially for organizations that are regulated. And there's so much risk involved when a company is out of compliance. And the amount of vulnerabilities that are out here these days is just astronomical.
I mean, we could probably have an entire new conversation about this and a whole nother hour on compliance, right? Vulnerability, reporting, how fast you report any type of exposure that you may have had. FinOps, and that's financial operations, heavily regulated space. If you don't know what's sitting on your servers and someone has a back door to it, you are going to have the biggest nightmare possible. And then how fast you actually respond to it, once again, another nightmare scenario. And we've seen companies left and right come through and say, oh yeah, we'll give you, we'll check your credit for you for the next year because we had this data breach. But the data breach is big, right? If my social security number and all my personal information is now sitting on the dark web because somebody plugged in an old PC that hasn't had a security update in, the last 5 years because no one was, utilizing it, or it was sitting in the system and, oh yeah, we wiped it clean. Or even worse, our hardware team sent this to be reused by a school or by someone else, and they didn't properly clean, right? Wipe the system. And now that person has access to our vulnerable information because they can log in for they're great little hackers and they like to get donated PCs. There are just so many different risks out here now for the technical space. Having dedicated professionals who are focused on that, you can find consulting teams, managed service teams that are out here. I'm exposed to a ton of different organizations that they straddle the world of making sure that a company is compliant so that they're providing the best service for even their external consumer customers. And business to business transactions are even more complicated because there are third-party vending relationships that if they're not in compliance, makes both companies viable for legal ramifications if they're not compliant. So, I mean, Amy, we could probably, once again, hour conversation about some of the highlighted things that some companies should start thinking about, but having dedicated professionals in the IT space who are covering those assets, who are really just focused on what that looks like, can really set your compliance department and your legal team up so that you are in a better position to mitigate risk, right? And it's all about mitigating risk, keeping costs down, and limiting exposure to any type of hacks that could possibly have. And that then leads into your cybersecurity professionals who are very tied into the IT asset management space, because once again, if you don't know what you have on your servers, that's a problem, right? Cybersecurity is wide open there. So there's just, I love technology. And it's funny, I think back about, coming through educational space and going through the accounting, and here I am in 2024, an advocate for technology and what that looks like for a professional in their career, although I have no desire to write a piece of code in my life.
Understandable.
So you know how that goes. But Jamison Link is the professional organization that is really focused on making sure we do the right people match with the right skill set match. And overall, if we're able to make that connection happen, we can give both the candidate an illustrious career with an organization to gain skills, and we can give the company the right skill set to help them move to the next profit margins that they're trying to target.
Yes, absolutely. And that's such a key point, is that you don't have to be a developer to be in the IT space. You don't have to be the one that's configuring the solutions, but you can still touch tech at different levels. Is there anything else that is of importance to you?
Right now, Amy, I am just, where I find my success for companies and candidates is making sure I understand what the candidate wants and what the client needs. And finding need and want are very interesting and different dynamics, but when they match, it often makes a great opportunity for the person and for the company.
Absolutely. That sounds awesome. Alisha, thank you so much for joining me today. I thought that this was such a valuable conversation. Great perspectives, great insight. How can the audience get in contact with you?
Well, I'm available immediately via LinkedIn. Just send me a quick direct message, and I'm happy to respond to any questions and be able to be a resource for any company that's looking for support or candidate that's looking for a new opportunity.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for joining me.
Awesome. Thank you. It was fantastic.
Thank you.